Hello, everyone. I'm representing today the team Beyond the Car, or BTC. Like the prior project, we had a team of close to 12 people. So the ideas that we're presenting today were spawned in a 3-day intensive charrette, but our group of 8 continued on and basically built our portion of the exhibit that you can see here at the Brickworks and the presentation I'm about to run through today. Our challenge was to rethink personal mobility for Toronto in the year 2040. So the first question we asked ourselves as a group was, do we need a car in the city in the year 2040? The group was divided, and we were basically trying to find out whether we need a vehicle or whether there's personal transportation can be eliminated and bikes and subways and whatnot can basically provide all our mobility. So this map here is a summary basically of where the city is going in terms of mass transit. So you can see all these white rings here represent 15-minute walks from subway stops. So you can see that there's still a large area of underserviced area represented by all of the blue on this map. So we came to the realization that there needs to be some sort of personal mobility service. But to change the way we move in a city is not enough to renew the automobile. We need to create a new system. Here you can see there's consortiums across North America that are looking at communications of vehicles and how they relate to their surroundings. All of the major car companies and transportation departments are involved in this research. You may have heard of the Google car, which was just legalized in California last week. Essentially, this vehicle has been driving around without a driver for 500,000 miles. Another precedent that we looked at was auto share. Auto share is a big trend. Across North America, we're looking at close to 1 million car share members. And of course, the electric car, which is already implementing into society. Now I'm going to take you through a video that we did to summarize our design concept and how it relates to the City of Toronto. That basically describes the system we've developed, and we have one more video to put you in more of a user context. You may have seen this prototype in the Brickworks. Put a little video together to animate it.
Basically, I'm saying.
Very soon we would both be completely twisted, but there was no going back. We would have to ride it out.
So I think you maybe get the idea of the PAT system now. The primary driver behind it is that it moves people and things, people and objects. So hence the interior design of the vehicle with collapsing seats that can allow packages to enter and be delivered. The other goals of our system are to be fast, fast door-to-door service, much like you would expect from a taxi today, to be multimodal, seamless integration of cycling and walking, subway and shipping, and to reclaim space. Basically, the footprint of this vehicle allows us to condense the existing infrastructure of roadways, which live in every city, and take some of that area back and give it to the pedestrians. Sharing, which is a huge part of our concept, allows people to integrate with their friends and their community to share this transportation mode and avoid moving empty vessels. On the technical side, we're looking to use electrical power for Ontario's green grid of renewables, nuclear and hydro. Environmental, we're looking for a zero CO2, utilizing greener energy and production methods, constructed with locally sourced and engineered biomaterials and composites. On the economic side, we're hoping to revitalize developing Toronto into an innovator of information technology and a premium test market. Ownership would be removed, so there's no need to own a personal vehicle. Essentially, the system would be at your fingertips. And to transform, so looking at manufacturing hubs like Oshawa and transforming them from a regional contract-based manufacturing facility into more of an intellectual property hub, where we can develop the smart grid that would power something like the PAT system. So if we go back to the system map that was animated, you can start to understand how the system works. Essentially, you have a controlled boundary, which is this outer ring. As soon as you enter into this controlled boundary, the vehicle will operate under the smart grid system. So the only vehicles that would be allowed to enter and move freely, not autonomously, would be specialty vehicles. You can see the outer connection to larger regional hubs, train, planes, and shipping. And of course, at the center of the city, we still have walking, cycling, and transit, subway. So in terms of the cityscape, you can see here in a cross-section through the road, a typical Toronto city street where you have 4 lanes of traffic. And in 2040, we've removed 1 full lane. So with the growing population, we still believe we can reclaim some 5 meters of street space and bring it back into exchange space for residents. Now, it's hard looking through the lens of 2040, but if we look at our biggest market, which would be millennials, at the time of 2040, we'll have 73 million millennials. And that is the age group between 16 and 32. And currently, they rank vehicles as number 17 on their list of priorities. And of course, their computers, cell phones, and musical devices are top 3. So that concludes the presentation on PAT, our autonomous network of driverless vehicles for Toronto 2040. I'd like to invite Victor and Miles up for the question period as well.
Are we going right into questions?
Yes. You look ready to go.
Okay, I really liked it. There are a lot of elements of this that I liked. 2040 is a time frame that's far enough out that I think a lot of this can actually happen. I like how you took a lot of existing technologies and extrapolated them, like the Google driverless cars, the electric cars, and compared to some of the other design solutions that we had, this hasn't had as big a requirement on infrastructure changes. You can actually fit it within existing roads, so you'd have no problems with that. And there was a lot of this to like, is so the way I'd like to kick off the discussion.
Then I'm going to say the opposite, just for fun. No, there is something core here that I like, but you spent so much time on the Yelp and the communications in the car, and you just overloaded me with how nice a screen it was, and you're distracting from what is your core value proposition, which you didn't face up to honestly. There is something here, but show me an analysis of how much extra traffic you can move through a city when you replace 2 lanes of cars with 3 lanes of these vehicles that take up the 3-dimensional space more intelligently and presumably have some communications built in, can coordinate activity with traffic lights and so on. That's your core proposition that you can move on. You didn't do any analysis on it. I mean, you have to show me some numbers and say, you know, here's what happens with traffic when you have stop and go, here's what happens when people don't move in concert with each other. You know, there's lots of stuff about individual people moving, right? One person brakes, next person brakes, and that's how you get a traffic jam on a highway and there's no accident. So there's data out there, and you need to combine that with some assumptions about traffic light intelligence and the number of people per cubic meter that you have stuffed into those 3 lanes. Do the analysis, because there's a core idea here, but you spent all your time giving me some really nice songs and some wonderful intelligence on the window. You didn't explain that part. And I think there's something there, right? I mean, I agree that you got something right, but you need to prove it. You didn't prove it. I'd like to answer that.
I think that's a fair comment.
I'm going to switch up on the mic, please.
I think that's a fair comment, but our intention, I think it was a deliberate choice on our part to concentrate more on the sociological side of it and entertain thoughts of how people would adopt a system like this and how their patterns of use, and that's the side we tried to focus on. In terms of making better use of space, I think we focused primarily on the fact that these vehicles are maybe about 1/3 the size. That was part of it. Then the fact that it's an intelligent system, we assumed that we've seen General Motors with their E&V system. They've shown that you can actually get traffic flowing both ways through an intersection if you've got intelligent vehicles. So there's quite a bit you can achieve there in terms of efficiencies that way. But I'll be the first to admit, we certainly didn't do the hardcore analysis in terms of, that would be the next step for sure.
But even that last little bit, right? Just point us in the right direction, and you have a very powerful statement here, right? So I'll back off being so mean.
No. I think
but
it was
all
a fair
you
comment.
don't need a lot, right? Because there's people that can do traffic analysis, but show us, take us in that direction,
Yeah.
and tell us that you've thought about that, because that's the core thing, right? 9 million riders, small city, dense. You showed it a bit with the picture, but it'd be so powerful if you could just
I think
follow
that's
through.
Absolutely a fair comment. And I think, you know, in fairness to us, all 3 of us are industrial designers, so I think we tended to focus on the human side of it. And that, I think, interested us the most in terms of how people would adjust to a new way of living. And we thought our system was actually, you know, if I go back to what you said, we thought our system was quite radical, and we were assuming some really big things here. There's the idea that there's no longer going to be the ownership of private vehicles, for example, was quite a radical change for a lot of people. And so we got focused on how we would get people used to the idea of giving up their cars.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I think that's powerful, and I think, you know, there's a lot of data actually that would back up what you're saying, a lot of data around young people and their lack of interest in owning cars, for example, and they don't see them the way our generation saw them and all that. And then the other piece I thought that would be interesting if you could expand on it, and maybe you did some work on it but it just didn't show up, is on sort of the environmental footprint side. You talked about, you know, to power it with renewables and nuclear, so I'm assuming then that these are battery powered and you charge them up overnight and take advantage of the nighttime low emitting power. Is that sort of the model that you were?
It's an interesting system because what we're assuming, these vehicles are running 24 hours a day. So if they're not carrying people, they're carrying freight. But whenever there's an idle, they run on. They would basically go off the system and recharge whenever they can. So we would be looking at different ways to recharge. It was not like you park them at night and they recharge. Because you don't own them, they can recharge whenever the load is lighter. So whenever this vehicle isn't needed, it's off charging or getting repaired or cleaned or whatever. So that was another way we were thinking of making the system more efficient.
Right, and you would imagine that, you know, probably would be lighter at night, and that actually matches with when is lower price electricity typically and lower emitting electricity by and large, at least in this province.
Well, there's a lot of things we didn't get into in the presentation simply because of time, but the other one was if you look at what's happening on our streets and highways today, so much of the traffic is freight. So the idea was, why not move a lot of that freight at night when these vehicles aren't being used? So therefore, you can get them being used 24 hours
So then you
a
have
day.
to fit in some kind of quick charge
Exactly.
system or battery swapping that would allow you
Yeah.
to do that. Okay, it's interesting. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I like the presentation a lot, and I like the provocation a lot. I think, you know, one of the things that was clear and has come up in some of the comments is it was heavily skewed towards the individual experience as opposed to maybe the urban experience. And so I have a number of questions that, you know, may or may not have been considered. But, you know, I was trying to imagine what happens at the controlled boundary point, right? The sort of land where people still own cars, you know, coming into this place where now you're entering into these pods, and what that whole exchange is like, and are they, you know, is that a ring of, you know, 12-story parking garages so people can then get into their personal vehicle, and what that does to the communities that actually have to house those things, you know, and so I mean.
Yeah, you do kind of have this vision. Like, I think, you know, we actually did an implementation plan, like a work back to how would we would get here,
Yeah.
more in sort of a loose sticking out format. But you know, we're imagining that Google cars that exist today, and we assume they're going to start rolling out in more numbers than the dozen that are out there. But they will be able to flow in with traffic,
Mm-hmm.
and still be under this autonomous smart grid system,
Mm-hmm.
but working towards the fact that, you know, this control boundary, you know, essentially it works much like the transit does today, where you have hubs that take you on trains that take you in further regions, and you have airport, and so the multimodal component of it, and the fact that a car that, like, say, exists today, a Google car, could integrate into the system, but we're looking at it more from sort of a TTC sort of viewpoint, and you know, you have an integrated system that you wouldn't need to have this private ownership of that Google car. You have this shared vehicle.
Yeah, I mean, I guess and you've touched on it, is the question of numbers. How many of these things would you need? And I'm just trying to imagine scenarios, and again, maybe I'm stuck in a kind of 20th century model, but the equivalent of being downtown on a Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock and trying to get a taxi, or coming out of the Rogers Center after a Blue Jays game, or King Street on a Saturday night, where all of a sudden you need a lot of these things very quickly.
Just like taxis, yeah. We're thinking about 100,000 of them.
100,000.
The difference, the big assumption we're making is 30 years worth of computational horsepower, and we're assuming that an intelligent grid system would be able to work things out relatively easily in terms of where these vehicles should be and when they should be there.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be part of the solution. And the other one is, it works in concert with other systems, like we talked with bikes, subway, those systems still exist, so it's not the only system.
It's almost natural that cities get denser, and you just cannot permit every car into the city core. Much like in Europe, you know, they close off the city cores for pedestrians only. So that's kind of the same virtual idea, that some vehicles, just because of their size, will not be permitted into this boundary. You can still own the vehicles, and they're probably gonna have this autonomous capabilities, even like outside of the boundary. But within the city, there will be exclusive transportation system that will serve the city core. Yeah.
Any questions? Just one. Curious. Oh yeah. Just from a safety point of view, these personal pods, it looks like they'd be interacting with buses, but they look like these comfortable little lounge chairs. How do you get them through the streets and get the people there in one piece?
Well, that was another one of our big leaps. Again, getting back to advances in computing technology, these vehicles would have one of the ways they get a lot more efficient is they have a lot less in terms of safety that we have now in terms of collision systems. Like, there's no airbags, there's no seat belts, none of that stuff. The whole idea is these vehicles avoid collisions 100% of the time. It's a huge leap of faith, but in 30 years, the assumption is these vehicles avoid all obstacles at all times. Therefore, we can make a much lighter vehicle, means a lot less energy to move. The vehicle itself is smaller. It's an entirely different way of looking at how these vehicles work. And also, we have to give up some of our faith in our own abilities and give it to technology, which I personally am a little skeptical about, but you have to, again, you have to assume 30 years of technology.